All right, well, we're back with another video interview series for the new Reality Roundup. And today we've got an incredible guest. We've got Elisa Villanueva Beard, who is the CEO of Teach for America. And we are excited to dig into all things TFA and teaching and tutoring and all the work being done to meet the challenges of this new era. So welcome, Elisa.
Thank you, Mark. Really great to be here. Excited for our conversation.
Yeah. So I thought, obviously, there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot going on with TFA, a lot going on in education. But I thought we could start by just grounding it in your own experience. You recently announced that next year, 2025, you're going to be stepping down as CEO, and that marks 25 years with TFA. And I think it also marks 35 years of Teach for America, which is,
That's right.
an incredible accomplishment for a nonprofit. So I wonder if you could start by just reflecting a little bit on when you joined, the teaching workforce back in 1998, and what did that feel like? What was the pitch, and what got you interested in the first place?
Yes. That was a long time ago, almost 26 years ago now, since I entered the classroom. And, I grew up in South Texas on the Texas-Mexico border. I went to school in the Midwest at DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana, a world away from where I grew up. And I was determined to be the very first lawyer in my family. And my mom's heart was set on it, and so was my dad's, and so was mine. And I was fiercely focused on that. And then I met Teach for America through graduates who had come back to campus and were talking about their experience. And right away, Mark, what stood out was like, oh my gosh, there's these incredible leaders who just reject every day that it is okay, that kids growing up in low income communities, mostly kids of color, literally don't have access and opportunity, not because they're not smart enough, not because they don't want it, but because they just lack the access and the opportunity. There's something just fundamentally wrong about that. And so the pitch was like, come change the world, be alongside folks who will not give it an inch for the belief of what's possible for kids and are joining a movement of people who are saying, let's do something about this together. And so I promised my mom and my dad it would be 2 years and that I would get back to, going to law school. But 2 years has now turned into over 25 years working on this. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done and really just honored to have been part of this journey over this many years and seen, the trajectory of Teach for America since its first, decade and to today.
Well, we're very lucky we stole you from the world of law school and legal work. That's important, but it's lucky for America that you joined the teaching world. It feels like in the 90s, it's hard to kind of recreate this, but there was this moment where everyone felt like, the future is ahead of us. Social entrepreneurship is this opportunity to change things. Was that part of the moment for you? And have you ever thought back to like how do we recreate that? Because it feels like we've gone through these ebbs and flows, and right now, one of the things people are talking about is that kids don't necessarily believe the world can be made better through their actions.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, A Nation at Risk came out in the 80s, but there was just this like belief and thought of we have to center education. This is what was being talked about. There were teacher shortages, and although TFA doesn't respond to the teacher shortage, there was just an opening, an opportunity, and to really motivate and encourage and help the young generation who's being recruited for all these lucrative offers across the country to consider, having an impact, getting in the arena, figuring out service, a sense of service and being part of something that's bigger than you. And that was sort of the tenor, and there was space for this. And I remember that being, something that was really motivating to me. And we called it was the civil rights movement of our time, ensuring every child had an excellent education. And so, that was very inspiring to me, and being part of something, that's a collective was really important to me. I mean, the whole world has changed, Mark, right? So I just think like also we have a fundamentally different generation that we're trying to recruit. So since Gen X, we had millennials, we have Gen Zs. And so I don't think there's a way to replicate that to today, but I do think there is a way to understand the world around us, what is needed, and this generation, and what is motivating them, what are the barriers to entry to figure out how do we get this generation to say yes to this? Because I think it's one of the most important mandates. If we have any shot of transforming this system to prepare kids for this life that they're entering, and to modernize the teaching profession and education generally, we cannot do it without this young generation, channeling their energy, their leadership, who are closest to this. They just got out of K-12 schools and have so many ideas. And we've really got to inspire them. To me, we don't have a supply issue. We have a problem of like the value proposition that we're offering. And I think that's what we need to be interrogating as we go forward, and something we've been doing, a lot at Teach for America to ensure we are relevant and able to thrive with this generation.
Yeah, and that seems like one of the essential questions, that if we cannot figure out a way to make education a place where that is a magnet for talent, then everything else we're trying to do is going to be, that much harder to do. One of the things that has always been inspiring about TFA there's a lot of people with crazy ideas out there, and like, we're going to recruit all these people, we're going to, transform the way teaching works. But it's really hard to put that into action. And I think like when we were creating, 50 Can in 2010, we were looking at other organizations that came before us. We definitely tried to learn from the example of Teach for America that it was very local, but it also had this national reach. And you were there, along the way of that being built, first as a ED in the Rio Grande Valley, and then later a COO, and then CEO. I wonder if there's, as you kind of reflect on that journey, what were a couple of things that made that work? Why was Teach for America able to make that leap to that nationwide scale when a lot of people stumble from going from that, the site-based example to something bigger?
Exactly. I mean, I do think I've been reflecting on being appreciative of how hard it is for a startup to work, to get real proof of concept, and then sort of be in a position to scale and then successfully scale and then deal with what comes at scale. Those are all very different life cycles of an organization and require a lot of, different skills and capacity, capability, systems, processes, et cetera. And then as we're sort of managing the outside world alongside that. So what I would say is, in the first decade, the proof of concept, I just think it was a very, grassroots feel, like just all in for justice and ensuring that, kids got what they deserve. And there's a lot of heart and a lot of just like, we will tear down walls for kids, that I almost feel like by sheer will, we were able to rise to the occasion, get proof of concept. In order to scale, what I would say the things that really got solidified were very clear values of the organization. Things like, we don't admire problems, we are action oriented. We also operate with a sense of possibility. Like the moment that we don't believe it's possible, then we are our worst enemy. That is hope is needed in order for us to battle the deep challenges that are ahead of us. Things like taking personal responsibility and operating, together and with urgency. And so things that just really mattered. Plus, we also had very clear goals. So we were always working to grow with quality. And that was the big thing in that first phase of growth. And I was our executive director. Then I became our chief operating officer, as you said, leading the field. And so we had very clear goals on not just like number of people we're bringing in, but also we have been focused on racial and ethnic diversity since the beginning, and having that as something that impacts how we recruit. Our admissions process is different, but how we recruit. And then also knowing our teachers good, and how do we know, and we have to be accountable, because our first promise has always been to our students, and the accountability around that. Then we had goals around our alumni. Our theory of systemic change is to, transform the hearts and minds of this generation and people early on in their career to go on and be change agents and leaders working towards equity and excellence for all kids the rest of their lives, whether it's directly in classrooms or in education or outside of it. We need the whole ecosystem caring about this and using their expertise, their credibility, their knowledge, their networks to drive towards change. And that's always been what we've been in pursuit of. So always had very clear alumni goals. So I think that was huge. And then we were able to recruit just incredible talent. At the time when I became our chief operating officer, I was 29 years old, overseeing, the whole country and the field. And we grew it from 22 sites to 48. We just had a lot of eager, young talent who wanted to change the world and were highly accountable, and were growing fast into roles that we were probably not qualified to have and probably wouldn't get today in this context. But it was just a very strong mission orientation, and the stakes have always been really high for us. And like the students we serve are need the most, get the least, and so we've got to deliver consistently for them. And I would say that's how I would sort of sum up what got us to just, sort of grow. And we were growing at 18% compound annual growth rate for like 8 years straight. And we had to raise the fundraising to do that. We had to ensure our programmatic outcomes were good. And so it was just this incredible focus and inspiration and, great support and joy along the way. And, I've built my best friends have come from my colleagues working at TFA and doing hard things together.
Yeah, it does. When you think about all the different people you need to have in place to pull it off, it really is amazing, and it's a wild thing tracking the alumni of TFA and all the places they've gone, and it really has been kind of an amazing talent pipeline.
Yeah, we're 65,000 now, Mark, and
Yeah,
the
that's a lot.
vast majority of them are working in education or have a career serving low-income communities. So I say our students for almost 35 years now have been in the business of disrupting the life trajectories and careers of our core members, because that's what's actually happened as we get in it with students and families.
Yeah. It we spend a lot of time at 50 Ken worrying about talent, and we're trying to find like an ED here, or a field person here, and there's just a handful of people a year. I would imagine one of the hardest things is to really get your mind around the evolving nature of kids in America, students, prospective teachers. How have you approached that? And are there any things you wish you knew, 10 or 15 years ago about how that would change, and the challenges of recruiting?
Hmm. So, as we grew, as you say, we built a lot of infrastructure and processes and systems in order to support that. And as we grew, we were very centralized, very command and control, and just like very focused on our goals. I think the thing, as I reflect on then getting to scale and sort of the changes that have come with that and the things we've had to evolve and honestly transform in our entire practice. I mean, our essential program model, how we recruit, our selection process, our training and support are unrecognizable to anyone that came through even like 3 years ago. It's just very different in order to meet this generation where they are. So if I had to reflect like 10 years, the most important thing that we have to keep our eye on is this generation, the generation that's current. And, Teach for America was built for and by Gen Xers. And so then we had millennials, and then we had Gen Z. And so while there are current, through lines through all generations, there are different barriers to entry that have to be examined and understood, and then figure out how do we meet the generation where they are. And so that is the most important question that we have to constantly keep front and center on. Are we relevant to this generation? What makes us more or less relevant? What are table stakes for this generation in our offer of what we're selling or what we're asking people to join? And when things just don't work, that worked, 25 years ago. Do you want me to give you an example of something just to be concrete?
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
like a small mundane thing, but actually is very meaningful. So when I joined the Corps, actually up until 3 years ago, we started to pilot this. We used to ask Corps members to tell us where they want to go teach, and you rank order them, but we decide. And we really work hard to match you because we know you're likely to say yes if we match you to where you want to go. But there are lots of core members who end up in various communities that are like, this is not where I wanted to go. But they said yes, and it worked. And we were able to, place core members across these very diverse set of regions. Well, this generation, some barriers to entry include finances, but also like mental wellness, like their own feeling of believing that they can do that and will have the supports. So uncertainty creates more anxiety. So in this example that I'm giving you, it's a very uncertain, our whole process of like getting
Hmm.
placed. Where am I going to teach? What school? What subject? Are you going to force me to teach a certain subject? And it goes on and on and on. And so we have done a lot to clear those uncertainties. So now you apply direct to the region you want to apply to. We still have one selection bar, but if you get in, it's not a question. We don't pick, you pick of where you're going to go. You get to prioritize what kind of school is most interesting to you if you're off limits on certain subject areas. And so there's just more agency. And so a big principle of our adjusted transformation has been centering the participant and giving more agency, which actually has unlocked a lot for us in terms of folks being able to stick with us through the process. And there are thousands of these decisions that are big and small that we have to adjust in understanding this generation and meeting them where they are.
That's helpful. Oh, I like that. All right, I'm going to steal that for our recruiting. Try to give a little more agency. We're not just going to plop you down. Uh, so, for those of us who were in education in 2020, who had maybe been doing some work before, it was a bit of a shock to realize kids aren't, going to wake up and go to school the next day. And I would imagine that was compounded by all the other things that were probably going on at TFA at the time. Wondering if you could just let us into that world a little bit, how you initially sort of tackled the pandemic, and what that led you to ultimately take on, and some new ideas that you decided to kind of bring into the world.
Yes. So when everything shut down and we went virtual, the first realization I had beyond like supporting the teachers right now that were closing out their spring was, oh my gosh, we've just recruited a new set of core members. And how are we going to train them? Because core to our training model is teaching, like we actually teach. And part of the acceleration of learning is, yes, you learn principles of teaching, but then you actually are doing it and you're getting feedback and you're getting better every day, and this is how we accelerate their learning curve. And that is a core part of our success. And I came to realize, oh my gosh, that's not going to be available to us. So are we literally going to place teachers in classrooms that have never met a child before in their life? And so the first thing we did is we went out to test with principals and superintendents, like, will you hire our teachers if they have never practiced teaching in their life and they mostly don't have an education background? We'll still figure out how to prepare them the best we can virtually, which we don't have a curriculum for. But do you want them? Like, we just need to know, is the demand gonna be there? And they all said yes to a T. I think they had the foresight to know, like, these are mostly 22-year-olds who like are going to be very comfortable in this setting. And plus we just had a track record and I think they just believed like, I don't know, I'm sure y'all will figure it out. So we went virtual and we created a new curriculum within 10 weeks to then execute on how to train our teachers virtually on what they need to know on the basics of teaching. We did have them do some tutoring, small groups, so nothing like teaching, but at least we did get them to meet students and practice engaging with families and students. And that was like the first move to digitizing and modernizing our training and support model that we have just been building on, and really scaled this last year in order to have a more customizable approach, have an ecosystem of supports. And so that was the first move to help us get on that trajectory, which I'm actually grateful for. And so it also led to one of the most incredible innovations that I'm just really psyched about. We started to do high dosage tutoring during the pandemic. I had told my executives, you all, like, let's be relevant. Let's show up for our partners. I want them to say, like, TFA was there for us. And so our executive director at the time, Katie Tennyson-Hoon in Phoenix, went out and started talking to students and educators and families, and was hearing they just need more adults on deck. I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm like, yeah, we're trying to bring core members. And so she did all the research on high dosage tutoring and said, Elisa, you've been telling us our core capabilities are finding talent, matching talent, and developing talent. We can do that with tutoring, and we have all the infrastructure. Like, what if we just used our recruitment infrastructure? It costs nothing to just pitch tutoring. And let's focus on third grade reading and middle school math, which are connected to a bigger goal that we have, a 2030 goal that we had set in 2020. And could we try it? And so she got funding from the governor and created a prototype. We have a reinvention lab that helped create the prototype and the pilot. And in that first year, she had just over 100 tutors. They were doing incredibly well. I mean, I was shocked at the progress. And so we do a pre-test, post-test. It's a hyper-local model. The main coach that coaches the tutors is an instructional leader on campus. And so it's a very coherent process for the kids because they're using the local the local curriculum, and that teacher knows everything. And so it's helping those tutors accelerate and be effective, giving them their lesson plans. Anyway, it worked really well. And then the demand for that started to grow in Arizona, but also across the country. So we then scaled that to 6 more regions, all to say 4 years ago, we had 100 tutors. Today, we have 2,300. And the evidence is incredible on what they're able to accomplish. 93% of our principals say that our core members are having an effective impact on student achievement. And we have, it's hyper local, so I don't have a bunch of data to roll up, although we're looking to have an external study done of our tutoring program. But the demand for this is growing. The supply seems endless. And so we have a big goal of getting to 10,000 tutors by 2030. And the most important, and not the most important thing, the most important thing is that we're having an impact now. And also it's creating our pipeline into the core, which we suspected could be true, but it is an early engagement strategy that's really authentic. So this generation's making decisions earlier about their career. So we need a way to capture their minds and their hearts. And this has been it. I mean, it's remarkable. Last year, 43% of the seniors that qualified to apply for TFA did. They got in at 3 times the rate as folks that did not do the Ignite program. And they said yes to our offer at higher rates. And then they showed up to the first day of school. So it shows us like they get this conviction within them and they know they want to do this. They believe they can do it and then they do it. And so we believe when we get to 10,000 core members, we project that that'll generate about 1,000 core members for us each year. And so it's just been this really incredible innovation, and it's relevant and it really matters because, as you know, Mark, like 10% of kids growing up in low-income communities have access to a high-quality tutor today, and they need the most, and they are recovering the slowest. And so we're just excited and honored to be part of the movement working to accelerate learning for kids today.
Yeah, I love that story. We've been huge fans of tutoring from the beginning, and I wish everyone moved as quickly as you were able to move in bringing that online. And I really feel like the secret to making this all work is to respond to the urgent challenges right now, but to do it in a way that's gonna support us in transforming education and creating a brighter future. And feels like the Ignite program is really leading the way in bringing those two ideas together.
Yeah, I really agree with that. It's helping us. Like what we learned through that is because we're hyper local, we have a track record of credibility, we have relationships. So we were able to get this off the ground really fast. Like enough hands went up, like we'll take them, we'll take them. And we've been able to scale fast because we have those relationships. And then we're able to learn because we're also nationally, we see all the patterns and we're able to take those learnings, codify them, accelerate them, and ensure that we're taking all the evidence base that's coming and putting it back into the system so it can grow. And to your point about it leading to the future, I mean, this is one great example of how we need to customize learning for kids, right? And so a tutoring, we do small groups. So this is an example of like taking one size fits all, customizing with a high quality tutor. Kids are working in community. And so that's really healthy for them too. There's a focus on belonging, and it's showing other adults can play different roles in the school day. That's really effective and helps us start to think about how do we reimagine this teacher role to make it more sustainable and able to really meet kids where they are and give them all that they need. So I'm excited about all that we're learning on that and what we will contribute as we learn from others and contribute our learnings to the field as well.
Great. Well, I know we've got one more year with you in the CEO role. Anything you
12 to 18 months, Mark,
12 to
just to be
18 months.
clear.
All right. So, any, just sort of to, kind of closing, anything you are aiming to do, anything we should be watching out for over those 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so I am fiercely focused on ending strong at Teach for America. I poured my heart and soul into this place. I believe Teach for America is so consequential for our country. And so we've got to be meeting the moment, having our greatest impact. And so I'm focused on continuing on the trajectory and the momentum we've built. We grew our core by almost 40% last year. We're on track to grow it again this year. We're holding on our numbers of racial and ethnic diversity. Last year, 57% of our core were people of color, 45% first gen. And a fact that people don't know is nearly 10% of our core members now are what we call second generation core members. So they themselves were taught by core members and have joined us. And I think it's the biggest affirmation of our work. We're going to continue to deliver great external studies. We've had 4 done that validate the positive work our teachers are doing in classrooms. And we are going to continue to have more alums taking on leadership roles that are making a difference as teachers, principal system leaders, policymakers, elected office, et cetera, to ensure that, we're helping our alums meet their greatest ambitions and continue to focus on being dreamers and doers at Teach for America. So I am excited to end strong and pass the baton along and make sure the next person can continue to run and build on the momentum.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Well, thanks for taking a few moments out of your, I'm sure, busy day to join us to talk about the world of education. So thanks again
Thank you,
and have
Mark.
a great
Really
day.
appreciate all that you do and your leadership. So thanks for having me.